A financial history of the world. The scale of the Andes and human ambition. The Andes Mountains stretch endlessly across the western spine of South America, rising and falling like an ancient wave frozen in time. From the icy peaks of Patagonia to the tropical highlands of Colombia, they dominate the horizon for more than 4,000 miles. These mountains are not merely a geographical feature. They are a force of nature, a challenge to every generation that has lived in their shadow. Their sheer scale humbles even the boldest hearts. Yet, despite their enormity, humanity has always been drawn toward them, not away. The Andes are a monument to endurance, but also to ambition. For centuries, people have asked the same question: how far can human will go when confronted with nature's greatest obstacles? In the modern era, this question took on a new meaning. As nations industrialized and demand for energy surged, the Andes became not just a symbol of beauty and danger but a test of what civilization could achieve. Beneath those ancient stones lay immense reserves of gas, oil, and minerals. Copper veins twisted through the rock like arteries. Natural gas fields waited, trapped in silence for millions of years. To reach them was to command both technology and courage. In the 20th century, as global finance began to link distant economies, ambitious corporations in the United States and beyond looked toward South America. The Andes, long seen as impenetrable, became the next frontier of possibility. Building a pipeline across them would require not only machinery capable of defying altitude and cold, but also the coordination of thousands of minds, the patience of governments, and the trust of investors across continents. At the heart of these monumental endeavors was a financial evolution that had taken centuries to mature. For such a massive project to exist, the very structure of capitalism had to make it possible. Individual wealth was not enough. The risk was too high, the cost too great, and the timeline too long. That is where the joint stock company entered the story of humanity's progress. Long before steel met stone in the Andes, the idea of shared ownership had already reshaped the world. In medieval markets and ports, merchants sought partners to share the cost of dangerous voyages. Ships that left European harbors carried more than spices and silk. They carried dreams, contracts, and collective faith. By the 17th century, this concept matured into the first modern corporations. The Dutch East India Company, the British East India Company, and later many others, demonstrated a simple but powerful truth: that people could achieve together what none could achieve alone. Each share of a company represented more than money. It represented trust, imagination, and a willingness to risk for a common purpose. Investors no longer needed to sail the seas or mine the hills themselves. They could instead participate in ventures through ownership. With limited liability, their personal fortunes were shielded, and their hopes could extend into new worlds. This system unleashed a force of creativity and ambition that would change the planet forever. Ports became bustling centers of trade. Stock markets emerged, where ideas were transformed into paper and paper into power. The foundation of modern capitalism was laid not through conquest, but through collaboration. Centuries later, the spirit that once launched fleets across oceans found a new stage in the mountains of the Andes. The task was no longer to discover distant lands, but to connect them. Engineers mapped valleys and ridges, calculating pressure, distance, and flow. Helicopters lifted massive steel segments to impossible heights. Workers braved freezing winds to weld pipes at altitudes where breathing itself was a struggle. And behind every hammer and machine was the invisible architecture of finance. Banks issued loans that spanned decades. Governments provided guarantees. Investors purchased bonds whose returns depended on the flow of gas thousands of miles away. Insurance firms analyzed every possible risk: landslides, earthquakes, political shifts, inflation, and even the human toll of labor in such extreme environments. Each of these elements fit together like pieces of a vast puzzle, and the picture they formed was a testament to human cooperation on a global scale. The Andes were no longer only a geographical barrier. They became a symbol of how finance could transform the impossible into the achievable. A pipeline running through these ancient ridges was not just a line of steel. It was a living story about courage, trust, and shared vision. In many ways, the Andes mirror the essence of capitalism itself. They are massive, unpredictable, and humbling. To climb them is to confront the limits of endurance. To build through them is to challenge the limits of organization. Just as the mountains rise from the earth, financial systems rise from human imagination. Both are shaped by time, pressure, and persistence. As the pipeline came to life, carrying energy through thousands of miles of mountain and plain, entire regions began to change. Remote communities gained access to electricity, roads, and trade. Jobs were created where once there had been only isolation. Schools and hospitals emerged in towns that were previously unreachable. But with growth came questions. Who truly benefits from progress? How is wealth distributed when global finance meets local reality? The story of the Andes is not only one of triumph, but also of complexity. Just as the mountains are layered with rock and mineral, so too are these stories layered with human hope and inequality. The joint stock company that once seemed like a perfect solution also created distance between investors and impact. Shareholders in New York or London could profit from pipelines they would never see, and from lands they would never walk. This separation between risk and responsibility lies at the heart of the modern economy. It fuels innovation, but it also tests our sense of ethics. Still, the balance between ambition and restraint, between dream and duty, continues to define civilization. Without shared capital, there would be no great bridges, no transoceanic cables, no satellites, no towering skylines. Every achievement of modern life is built upon invisible agreements between strangers who trust a system more than they trust one another. In the shadow of the Andes, this system reaches its most poetic form. The pipeline, gleaming under the sun, becomes a symbol not just of industry but of unity. Each bolt and weld carries the weight of centuries of financial thought. From the markets of Amsterdam to the skyscrapers of Wall Street, the journey of money converges here, in the silence of snow and stone. Standing before those peaks, one can sense the paradox of human ambition. We are small in the face of nature, yet capable of shaping it. We are fragile as individuals, yet powerful in numbers. The Andes remind us that progress is not the act of one generation but the continuation of many. Every company, every investment, every signature on a contract is part of that long chain of belief stretching back through time. As the sun sets behind the ridges and the sky turns gold, the mountains cast long shadows over the valleys below. Within those shadows, one can trace the outline of humanity's greatest achievements and its deepest questions. How much of the world should we reshape in our image? How far can ambition go before it forgets humility? The Andes remain unmoved by these questions, standing in silence as they always have. But the story written upon them, the story of pipes and contracts, of risk and reward, speaks loudly about what it means to be human. The financial history of the world is not only a record of markets and numbers. It is a reflection of our collective struggle to transcend limitation. It is the chronicle of how imagination becomes infrastructure, how dreams become systems, and how even the mightiest mountains can be crossed when minds and resources unite. And so, the Andes stand as both witness and teacher. They remind us that wealth is not created merely in banks or offices, but in the shared determination to overcome what seems impossible. They remind us that behind every company, behind every financial structure, lies the oldest and simplest human instinct of all: to reach farther, to climb higher, and to leave behind something that endures. In that sense, the scale of the Andes is not just a measure of nature's grandeur. It is a mirror of our own.